Is it our anniversary? Have we been doing this a whole year?
Been doing this for a year. Hey, girl,
Oh
hey.
my God. It's our anniversary. Ow. Made for you and me. Oh, well, happy anniversary to us. It's been a year of growth and challenging and being
Mhm.
pushed to think about things in different ways. So I am, well, happy anniversary to us. I'm very
Yes,
grateful
yes.
for you being in this space. Now you said so much in that clip, and I would have played the full thing. We usually try to keep clips like under 3 minutes, and there was like another minute and a half to go, but you said so much there. And EbonyJanice, we have been in conversation, particularly this week on this show, about the possibilities of what comes next, recognizing that Black women done lost 11,000 jobs last month, and we see that everybody purging everybody Black from everything, and then y'all see what happens. You can't keep your planes in the sky. Your stuff fall apart, but go ahead, keep being mediocre. And we are being asked to we are asking of ourselves to think about what comes next when it comes to having to build our own economic sustainable solutions and hire each other and build community and provide mutual, all the things that people have to do when they are abandoned by the systems upon which they used to depend. And as we see people talking about, we got to fight for democracy, and in 2 years there'll be in midterms and elections, we're going to bring it back. EbonyJanice, I don't want what we had back. I want something more. And I'm Gen X. I'm like at the edge of Gen X into millennialdom. And what you said so freed up my brain to think about different things that we could be fighting for. Because if we get back the democracy that we just had, that was the same democracy that allowed enslavement, it allowed Jim Crow. And when you talked about the fact that as millennials who are standing on the shoulders of those who came before you, sitting on the anybody who's put their kid on their shoulders know that the kid has a better view of the world than the parent underneath them does, because they're higher up and can see farther into the distance by virtue of the function that they are on the shoulders of those who came before. Help us to unpack how we do the imaginative work that is not locked into replicating what we all have known to exist.
Yeah, I really appreciate this conversation, even in particularly today, because I was there's a mesh of things happening in my personal world right now. I just
Mm.
experienced a racism this morning when
Oh
I
no.
went to get my car checked and at a place that I go to often. And on my way home, and I tend to live in very intentional Black spaces. It's a thing that I go out of my way to do. I'm like, if I live around a whole bunch of Black people, I'm less likely to experience the demonic nature of white supremacy in
Mm.
that way. And
Mm-hmm.
so I'm experiencing this racism this morning. I'm on my way home and I'm thinking, I got to get even more Marcus Garvey, right? Like I got to dig even deeper into if it was just me and Black people, I would be okay. And I wouldn't have experienced that this morning. And then it dawned on me that just this week, Chris Brown tweeted free Tory. Just this
Oh my
week, Diddy's trial. Just this week, everything that's coming back up with Tory Lanez and Megan Thee Stallion and
God.
Cassie and DDG and Halle Bailey. And I thought immediately, I wondered to my brothers, and I know that you have a large demographic of Black men listening. I
Yeah.
wondered to my brothers, does it make you sad that when I think about where I'm safe, I have to stop and be like, but am I safe with the Black man that I call my brother, father, lover, friend, right?
Mm.
And so when I talk about dreaming something else, it feels important to think about what Dr. Kimberly Crenshaw talks about, these intersections, that it's impossible for us to really think about building something where Black people are well and safe and free without acknowledging how violent we are to each other at the intersections, at the margins, right? That me as a Black woman who's obsessed with Black men, like
Mm.
obsessed with Black men, that if me as a Black woman, if I have to like falter a little bit in my thoughts about where I could be safe and I have to question Black men, then the one of the
Mm.
first things that we have to do is that Black men have to be willing to listen to that and do intentional work around healing that. And then
Mm.
the other layer. So I'm not trying to do a hierarchy of wrongness, because then there's ability, right? Me as a reasonably able-bodied person, the ways that I am harmful and violent to other groups of people inside of this
Mm.
Black community, where I don't think about, is this accessible? Where I don't think about, how are people who are chronically ill or disabled going to have access to this thing that I'm doing or even talking about right now in this moment, right?
Right.
So,
Right.
in order for us to imagine what is next, we do have to start with some serious healing. And we talk about it in pockets, but we just don't talk about it enough and intentionally, and then really build the ritual and the tools and the strategies to really do the healing, because we have healing to do in order for us to be able to have a collective dream. Like, the collective dream can no longer be whatever it was 50, 60 years ago, where Black men were ultimately saying to Black women, let us get Black people free first and then we'll deal with you. As if Black women could separate our gender and our race from our humanity,
Mm.
right? That there has to be some conversation internally for us to heal the ways that we harm each other internally, because we do it. Because we could get free, we could build this fantastic imagination of space where Black people are not dealing with the harm of white supremacist delusion because white people aren't there. We could pretend like that's the thing that we need to do, and then white supremacy is still sitting there because we got hierarchy of, gender, we got hierarchy of whose sexuality is preference, we got hierarchy of whose religion is preference, right? We have so much, and all of that is white delusion still. And we have to heal our internalized anti-Blackness and our internalized anti all these other things in order for us to be able to have the collective dream. So that feels like the first thing, that
Whew.
we got to get real about the fact that we got some serious stuff to heal together.
It's interesting. I have completely avoided engaging in conversation online. I've tried to avoid even looking, because online is a dangerous place right now. If you are a Black woman and you care about Black women and you care about Black men and women being able to be in relationship in a way that is healthy and respectful and going to be
Mhm.
something that leads towards community, it's been a bad week. It's been a bad week for that. And one of the challenges that we often confront is that when we think about what our community needs, we think about it very generically. Like, we need to be free. Black people need Black power. We need to love each other. But those feel like platitudes in ways that are very like surface level sort of comments that we say that don't really have roots in the ground, not boots in the ground, but roots in the ground, in any way that's sustainable, right? Because if we're saying that we want Black people to be able to be in spaces where we are free, we can build free spaces. That means that I need to I need to be conscious and aware of the cages that I have been dealing with as being a Black woman into that conversation, so that the free thing that we are trying to build is going to not have those cages replicated within it. So, like, if we say we want to build Wakanda, right? We were talking about Ironheart earlier today. Go see or don't go see Ironheart. Watch it when it comes out.
Watch it, watch
We
it,
were talking
watch
about,
it.
yes,
Hmm.
watch it, watch it, watch it. We were talking about Ironheart and Wakanda, and I love the idea. I love you. I know we all know Wakanda is a fictional place, and we know that, like, it's like when I used to do a Wakanda accent, I had to tell people this is not an African accent, because there's no such thing as an African accent. There are African languages from which you might have an accent, but the Wakanda accent does not really exist. But we can fictionalize the beauty of a place where there's equity, where people are able to have their needs met, and it feels wonderful. It feels amazing, because it felt like all us. And yet, if we're talking about building something that would approximate that level of freedom, and we're not also able to talk about the things that you just mentioned, then that to me really does speak to a type of freedom that reflects what we've already had. And we just established that what we've already had did not work for all of us. And
Hmm.
it doesn't even work for, no, there are some people who are thinking, y'all trying to, you're going to tear the Black man down. No, no, no. The Black man has a ceiling that they are going to hit if we stay within this system. Now, yes, your position in that ceiling might be higher than my position on the floor, but you are never going to be free as a Black man in a world where you participate in the hierarchies of oppressing Black women and participate in the white Christian nationalist hierarchy of white man, white woman, well, white, all the other men, then white women, and then people there below. But those conversations typically do not happen. I saw somebody who said Cassie's husband a better man than me, and the response was, yes, you're correct,
Yeah, he
better man
is.
than he is a better man than you. Next
Actually, he is.
question. And I thought that was a wonderful response. But if we're talking about building something beyond what the Democrats and the Republicans have, beyond this current era, where do we create space for that part of the conversation? Because for a lot of us, creating something that's better than what we currently have is still very, very generic.
So yeah, I want to speak to this idea even first, that in the hierarchy, that patriarchy is that Black men would somehow be above Black women, when the reality
Mm.
is the intimate relationship that a lot of Black men have with white supremacists, the supremacist delusion of patriarchy is not even real. It is an illusion. It is not even real. If you look at
Mm.
statistically, and even inside this so-called structure, Black men are not being educated at the rates of Black women. Black men
That's
are
right.
not, you
Good
know,
point.
being business owners at the rates of Black women. Black men, so Black women are still, even in spite and despite, this so-called hierarchy, Black women are still gaining access. And I think there's something very intentional and spiritual on our end, but I think there also is something very strategic about that keeps Black men
Mm.
out of those spaces of education and entrepreneurship. And that is very intentional. So buying into it, this is my plea, right? Like, this is my plea to the Black men who are still struggling with or trying to figure out their place in this conversation without the offense and without the feeling of, this is just more Black women trying to tear us down. It is actually the opposite of that. This institution, this idea of patriarchy has never ever in life actually benefited Black men. Never ever. Not there is no moment when patriarchy has benefited Black men, both personally and or overall, right? Because Black men are still by and large still marrying Black women more than any other group of people are marrying Black women, right? So that is to say then that if your family is not well, then you actually are not well. So there's the personal and, the communal implications of it. And the thing that I want to say about where I feel like from a heart place that has to start is that we have to start by acknowledging our own privilege. This is the thing that helps me to navigate this conversation about how do I dream something bigger and more possible. And I want to talk about the fantastic imagination with Pro Pledge in a second, but how do I imagine something bigger and more possible is I have to acknowledge the ways that growing up in a Southern Black Christian experience caused me to be homophobic. It's just a fact, right? It's just a fact.
Wait, can you say that one more time? Can you just say
growing
that one
up
more
in
time?
growing up in a Southern Black Christian experience it was inherent that I would be homophobic. Duh. There's nobody that's surprised about that. There is not a listener, there is not a homosexual person, there is not a queer person that is surprised to hear me say that I grew up Southern Black Christian and that somehow I was homophobic at some point in my life.
Mm.
And
Come
then
on.
at which point I acknowledge the privilege of existing in this cis heterosexual body, right? That there is some privilege there that I don't have to filter through the things that queer people have to filter through, then it makes me automatically and instantly I have more grace and more tenderness towards other people who don't
Right.
have to filter through the things that queer people might have to filter through, right? Like automatically I can acknowledge my privilege. As a reasonable able-bodied person, I can automatically acknowledge my privilege. And at which point I do that, it takes some of my defensiveness away when it's time for
Mm.
conversations about what is it that we need to do in order to move forward. And originally, when I first began to call myself a womanist, one of the things that I loved about the idea of womanism, which is centering Black women's intellectual and spiritual authority, womanism basically asks us to walk into the room and pass the microphone to the person least likely to be heard. And so there are even times as a cisgender Black heterosexual Black woman where I'm not the person who should have the microphone. And I
Wow.
feel like particularly for a lot of people, again, let's go to the hierarchy. And so I'm only talking about Black men because in the hierarchy, that the hierarchies that we have been set up as a result of white supremacist delusion, even inside of our own communities, that Black men would often have the microphone. That is just
Mm.
historically accurate, that Black men would have the microphone, even if the first person to have a dream wasn't Martin Luther King, this was a Black woman. If somehow she didn't have the microphone, Martin Luther King had the microphone. I'm glad he had the microphone, but there were other people that he probably should have passed the microphone to. And that is not
Mm.
at all denigrating or downgrading or tearing away from his impact or his importance. I'm saying that to Black men. That doesn't, saying for you to pass the microphone in this conversation about what we need to do to heal is not tearing you down. It's not saying that you're not worthy. It's saying that there are other voices in this community that we need to be listening to. And I think that that is, again, the place where we start. I talked about the fantastic imagination, and I'm done with this sermon, but I was talking about the fantastic imagination of Pearl Cledge, who's written fiction, nonfiction, plays, all kinds of things.
Amazing
And
writer.
and Pearl Cledge is one of my favorite storytellers. The first man I ever loved with was a character in her fiction book. His name is Blue Hamilton. And
Oh,
yeah, Blue Hamilton is
you
the first
love
love of my
Blue.
life.
Oh my God.
And so the reason why I bring Blue Hamilton up into in this conversation is because in this community, in this fictional community that she built, which is set in the West End in Atlanta, Georgia, it's a real place. Like the blocks that she's naming are real places, but the community that she's talking about is a fictional place. But
Mm,
basically, their mantra is in this community, the women and children will safe, and the men will be safe, and the men will work and act like they have some sense. And I always bring it Procledge into the conversation about our imagination of what this
yes.
thing could look like. Because what she was imagining is what are the things that would be necessary in order for us to be able to actually survive in community together, right? That if we
Mm,
were to say, okay, Marcus Garvey was right, that we need to build fractions and spaces that are just black centered where we're sharing our resources, all these things that I would consider a part of our communal building when we get ready to really say, okay, we want something other than democracy, because democracy supposedly means rule by the people, and that is not what's currently happening, and we know that for
right.
sure, that the people
Right.
are not ruling, right? But all of these things that we say that we would have in our community if it was exclusively black, or if it was largely just black people, that the women and children safe in this so-called community that you're talking about, and are the
Mm,
men working and acting like they got some sense, right? And that's the very basic thing that Blue Hamilton was saying. And they really began to flesh out a lot of things that just would not happen if the women and children were safe, and if the men were working and acting like they had some sense. And so
wow.
what do we need to do to continue to use our imagination? And we can go back to Wakanda to include that as a part of our fantastic imagination. We can go back to, Black Wall Street, and use the reality of Black Wall Street, use the reality of what was happening in, Tulsa, Oklahoma before the white violence came. And we can use our imagination to say, what things might we put in place? If we could go back to that moment, what things
Yes.
might we put in place to ensure that what the violent thing that ended up happening doesn't happen next time around? Because we have built these fractions of safe spaces for ourselves historically, and the violence of white supremacy showed up. And when the violence of white supremacy showed up and overtook the ideas that we set out, then it was unsafe for us any longer. Well, guess how that also was possible? And it's just a thing that we don't talk about enough. It also was possible because somebody was in the house. We're not going to talk about centers, but somebody was
Mm,
in the house absolutely welcoming in the toxic violence of the white supremacist delusion, and making it possible for us to be unsafe. Whereas if we were saying the women gonna be safe, and the children gonna be safe, and the men gonna work and act like they got some sense, and if we were saying that all people are welcome here, and that we won't sacrifice one person for the sake of the
mm,
hierarchy, and that we won't sacrifice poor people because the wealthy people want to make sure that we hold on to our wealth, and that we won't sacrifice the disabled people because the people with abilities want to make sure that we're good. Inside, that is white supremacist delusion that introduces those ideas, that there, so we could go back to those, and we could use our imagination to begin to build out what are some of the things that we would put in place if we were in that moment. And that will help us to have more tools and more ideas and more of a fantastic reality about how is it that we actually move forward. But it all starts with our willingness to acknowledge our privilege, to acknowledge, the ways that we are harmful to each other at the multiple intersections that we exist in. And for, the original reason that I remember you wanting to linger in this conversation was because I said that we will be free when all Black people are free. And until we
yeah.
decide that all Black people are worthy of this freedom journey that we're on, and not that one or two of us should get there first and let me get there and get comfortable. No, that
Whew.
when we decide that we all mean business about collective Black freedom, and that there is no Black person that we should be leaving behind. I mean, I do got
You
a couple that we could leave
you
behind, but
just
that's not the point.
did somebody pass the offering plate? Did we is it circulating?